Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Embarking on your Ph.D. thesis is a monumental step, probably one of the most challenging and rewarding journeys you'll ever take. It's the grand finale of your academic marathon, a culmination of years of hard work, late nights, and countless eureka moments. But let's be honest, staring at that blank page can be incredibly intimidating. Where do you even begin? How do you transform all that complex research into a coherent, compelling document? Well, you've come to the right place. In this video, we're going to break it all down. We'll walk you through a clear, step-by-step guide to structuring and writing your PhD thesis from the introduction all the way to the conclusion. Think of this as your personal roadmap to thesis success. First up, the introduction. This isn't just a warm-up. It's your chance to grab your reader's attention and set the stage. You need to clearly state your research problem, explain why it's important, and outline your key research questions or hypotheses. Essentially, you're telling your reader what you're going to do and why it matters. A strong introduction provides context, defines your scope, and gives a sneak peek of your thesis structure. It is like the opening scene of a great movie. It has to be captivating and promise an exciting story ahead. We'll cover how to craft that perfect opening hook and establish the significance of your work right from the get-go. Next, we dive into the literature review. This chapter is where you prove you've done your homework. It's not just a summary of everything you've read. It's a critical synthesis. You need to analyze existing research, identify the gaps, and show how your work fits into the bigger academic conversation. A great literature review positions your research, demonstrates your expertise, and builds the intellectual foundation for your own study. Think of yourself as a detective, piecing together clues from past studies to reveal a mystery that only your research can solve. This chapter justifies your entire project, so it's crucial to get it right. Now for the heart of your thesis, the methodology chapter. This is where you explain the how of your research. What methods did you use to collect and analyze your data? Whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or a mixed methods approach, you need to be crystal clear and meticulous in your description. Why did you choose this specific method? How did you ensure your approach was rigorous and valid? This chapter needs to be so detailed that another researcher could, in theory, replicate your study. It's all about transparency and demonstrating the robustness of your research design. This is your scientific blueprint, proving your results are credible and trustworthy. Following the methodology, we arrive at the results and discussion chapters. These are often separate but are deeply interconnected. The results chapter presents your findings in a direct, objective way, often using tables, graphs, and charts, just the facts. Then the discussion chapter is where you interpret those findings. What do these results actually mean? How do they answer your research questions? How do they relate back to the literature you reviewed? This is your chance to shine, to showcase your analytical skills, and to make your unique contribution to the field. You'll connect the dots, highlight the implications of your work, and acknowledge any limitations. Finally, we have the conclusion. This is your grand finale. You'll summarize your key findings, reiterate the significance of your research, and suggest avenues for future studies. It's not just a repeat of your introduction. It's a powerful final statement that leaves a lasting impression on your reader. It's about bringing your entire academic journey to a satisfying and impactful close. Writing a Ph.D. thesis is a marathon, not a sprint, but with the right structure and a clear plan, you can navigate it successfully. I hope this step-by-step guide has given you a clearer picture of the road ahead. Remember, every great thesis started with a single sentence. You can do this. Writing a Ph.D. thesis can be one of the most rewarding yet challenging academic endeavors. It represents years of research, thought, and dedication, and it is the culmination of your academic journey. However, before you get to the exciting part of defending your research, there are critical steps to follow to ensure that your thesis is structured logically, thoroughly researched, and well written. This guide will walk you through each chapter of the Ph.D. thesis, providing detailed insights into each stage of the process, along with examples and practical advice to help you along the way. Now let's start with step by step to learn each step in thesis. First, start from abstract. The abstract serves as a concise summary of your entire research, providing readers with a quick overview of the key elements of your thesis. It is the first part of your thesis a reader will engage with and often determines whether they continue reading. A well-crafted abstract offers a snapshot of your research. Problem, objectives, methodology, findings, and conclusions. It typically spans 200 to 300 words and should be written with precision and clarity. You might be thinking, what even is an abstract and why is it such a big deal? Well, stick around because in the next 5 minutes we're going to demystify the abstract and give you a foolproof formula to write a killer one. So, what is an abstract? Think of it as the movie trailer for your entire thesis. It's the very first thing your professor, examiner, or any future reader will see. It's a short, powerful summary of your entire research project. It has to be comprehensive enough to give a full picture, but concise enough to be read in just a minute or two. A great abstract will make someone want to dive into your full thesis, while a weak one might make them put it down, so no pressure, right? Don't worry, it's easier than it sounds. Let's break it down into its key components. Your abstract needs to tell a complete story, and every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. For an abstract, this translates to four essential parts: the problem, the methods, the findings, and the conclusion. Let's look at each one. First up is the research problem and your objectives. This is your why. What gap in knowledge are you trying to fill? What problem are you addressing? You need to state this clearly and explain why it's important. Research problem. This is the central issue or gap your research addresses. It identifies why the problem is significant within the context of the existing literature and how it contributes to the field. Example, the impact of urbanization on biodiversity loss remains underexplored in tropical regions, despite its growing importance for conservation efforts. Example 2, you could say something like, this study investigates the impact of remote work on employee productivity in the software industry. This sets the stage immediately. Then you state your objective. The goal is to examine the relationship between flexible work schedules and overall team performance. Example, this study investigates the effects of urban expansion on biodiversity in tropical rainforests through comparative species diversity indices. See? You've told your reader what you're studying and what you hope to find out. Next, you need to talk about your data and methods. This is the how. How did you go about your research? You don't need to detail every single step, but you should give a clear overview. Did you use surveys, interviews, experiments, or analyze existing data? Be specific but brief. For instance, data was collected through online surveys distributed to 300 software developers, and the results were analyzed using statistical regression models. This tells the reader that your research is based on solid, quantifiable data and a recognized analytical approach. It builds credibility and shows your work is methodologically sound. Data. Here, mention the data used in your study. Distinguish between primary newly collected and secondary existing data sources. Example, primary data was collected from 15 urban and 15 rural sites across Southeast Asia. Methods. Describe the methodology used for data collection and analysis. Briefly discuss the approach, be it qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods. Example, a quantitative approach was employed using GIS to map land use changes, and species population surveys to quantify biodiversity impacts. Now for the exciting part, your key findings. This is the what. What did you discover? This is the core of your abstract. You need to present the most important and significant results of your study. No fluff, just the main takeaways. A good example would be, the results indicate that remote work flexibility is associated with a 20% increase in productivity when employees are given control over their work hours. This is a powerful data-backed statement that immediately grabs attention. It's the headline of your research. Be bold and state your most impactful result clearly. Finally, we have the conclusion. This is your so what. What do your findings mean for the bigger picture? What are the implications of your research? This is where you connect your results back to the initial problem. For example, this research suggests that implementing flexible remote work policies could be a key strategy for the tech industry to enhance employee efficiency and overall output. Your conclusion should offer a final, thought-provoking statement that summarizes the value and significance of your work. It leaves the reader with a clear understanding of why your research matters. So now that you know the components, here are a few practical tips to make your abstract shine. First, and this is the golden rule, write your abstract last. I know it appears first in the paper, but you can only summarize your research after you've actually finished it. Writing it last ensures it accurately reflects your entire thesis. Second, be incredibly clear and concise. Avoid jargon and overly technical terms wherever possible. Remember, someone from outside your specific field should be able to understand it. Third, make sure it can stand alone. The abstract should provide a complete overview without needing any other part of the thesis for context. And that's it. Your guide to writing a high-converting abstract. Now, in this slide, we're tackling one of the most crucial and often most dreaded parts of any thesis or dissertation, the introduction chapter. I know just hearing the word can be intimidating, but what if I told you that a well-written introduction is your secret weapon? It's not just a formality. It's the chapter that hooks your reader, sets the stage for your entire study, and convinces them that your work is important. A strong introduction gives your examiners a fantastic first impression and makes them want to keep reading. So if you've been staring at a blank page, wondering where to even begin, you're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to break down the introduction chapter into simple, manageable sections. We'll go through what each part needs to do. I'll give you clear examples, and I'll share some practical tips to help you write with confidence. By the end of this, you'll have a clear roadmap to crafting an introduction that is powerful, persuasive, and sets you up for success. Let's get started. First up is the background section. Think of this as the opening scene of a movie. Its job is to set the context and introduce the broader research area to your reader. You need to paint a picture of the current landscape of your topic. What's the general conversation happening in your field? Why is this area significant right now? You don't need to go into a full-blown literature review here, save that for chapter 2, but you do need to provide enough context for your reader to understand why your specific research problem matters. For instance, if your thesis is about urban biodiversity, you could start by saying something like, as the global population grows, urbanization has become one of the primary drivers of biodiversity loss. Tropical ecosystems, which are rich in biodiversity, are particularly vulnerable to these effects due to rapid urban sprawl. See how that immediately establishes the big picture. It's broad, relevant, and leads naturally towards a more specific issue. Another example, if you're studying climate change and agriculture, you might begin with, climate change is a growing concern worldwide, with agricultural productivity being one of the most severely impacted sectors. This approach shows your examiner that you understand the wider field and aren't just working in a vacuum. It demonstrates your expertise and prepares the reader for the specific problem you're about to introduce. Once you've set the stage with the background, it's time to zoom in on the research problem. This is where you pinpoint the specific gap, issue, or unanswered question that your thesis is going to address. This section needs to be crystal clear. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve? A common mistake is being too vague. You need to move from the general context you just established to a very specific, identifiable problem. Building on our first example, after discussing urbanization and biodiversity loss, your research problem could be, there is a gap in understanding the specific impacts of urban sprawl on biodiversity in Southeast Asian rainforests. Despite growing urbanization, this statement is precise. It identifies a knowledge gap, the what, and a geographical location, the where. It's not just about biodiversity loss in general. It's about a specific type of ecosystem in a specific region. Similarly, for the climate change example, after talking about agriculture's vulnerability, your problem statement might be, there is insufficient data on how small-scale farming in sub-Saharan Africa is affected by climate change, specifically by rising temperatures. Again, it's clear and focused. A strong research problem acts as the foundation for everything that follows. It justifies your entire study by showing that there's a genuine need for this new knowledge. With your research problem clearly stated, the next logical step is to define your research objectives. If the research problem is the what, the objectives are the how. What are the main aims and goals you plan to achieve with your study? These objectives must be directly linked to your research problem and should be measurable, realistic, and achievable within the scope of your project. Think of them as a to-do list for your research. For our urbanization study, an objective could be: the objective of this study is to assess the impact of urban expansion on biodiversity in tropical rainforests by comparing biodiversity indices in urban and rural environments. This is specific and measurable. You can actually go out and compare those indices. For the climate change thesis, a clear objective would be: this research aims to understand the relationship between temperature rise and crop yield in sub-Saharan Africa by analyzing historical climate and agricultural data. Your objectives guide your methodology and provide a clear framework for your research. They tell your reader exactly what you intend to accomplish. Keep them concise and action-oriented, using verbs like to assess, to identify, to analyze, or to compare. Flowing directly from your objectives are your research questions or hypotheses. This is where you get even more specific about what your study will investigate. Research questions are interrogative statements that you aim to answer, while hypotheses are declarative statements that you aim to test. Whether you use questions, hypotheses, or a mix of both often depends on your field and the nature of your study. For an exploratory study, questions are common. For a study testing a specific theory, hypotheses are more likely. Let's look at our examples. For the biodiversity thesis, a key research question could be: does urbanization significantly reduce species diversity in Southeast Asian rainforests? Or you could frame it as a hypothesis: urban expansion in Southeast Asia leads to a significant reduction in local species diversity. For the climate change study, you could ask: what is the quantitative relationship between rising temperatures and maize yield in sub-Saharan Africa? A corresponding hypothesis might be: a 2 degrees Celsius increase in average temperature will lead to a 25% decrease in maize yield in the studied region. These questions or hypotheses are the sharpest point of your introduction. They are the exact queries your research is designed to resolve, and your entire thesis, from data collection to conclusion, will be built around answering them. Now comes a critically important section: the importance of the study. You've told your reader what you're doing and why there's a gap. Now you need to answer the so what question. Why does your research matter? Who benefits from this knowledge? This is your chance to sell the value of your work, discuss its relevance and potential contributions, whether they are academic, societal, environmental, or practical. For our urbanization study, you could argue, this study is vital for urban planners and conservationists. It provides evidence-based recommendations for integrating biodiversity conservation into urban development plans, potentially leading to more sustainable cities. This shows real-world impact. For the climate change example, you could state, understanding this relationship will help policymakers and farmers in sub-Saharan Africa develop effective adaptation strategies, such as introducing drought-resistant crops, thereby safeguarding food security for millions. Don't be shy here, clearly articulate the contribution your thesis will make to your field and to the world at large. This section is what elevates your research from a simple academic exercise to a meaningful contribution to knowledge and society. Next, we need to address the scope and limitations. No study can do everything, and it's a sign of a mature researcher to acknowledge this. The scope defines the boundaries of your study, what is included and what is excluded. Being upfront about this prevents your examiners from criticizing you for not covering something you never intended to. For example, this study focuses on rainforests in Southeast Asia, specifically in Malaysia and Indonesia, and does not include other tropical regions like the Amazon. This is a clear boundary. Limitations are factors that might influence your results but are outside of your control. For instance, the research does not account for the potential long-term effects of climate change on biodiversity, which could be a confounding variable, or this study is limited by the availability of historical crop yield data, which may not be consistently recorded across all regions. Acknowledging limitations doesn't weaken your thesis. It strengthens it. It shows that you have thought critically about your research design and understand its constraints. It demonstrates honesty and academic integrity. Finally, you'll wrap up your introduction with the structure of the thesis. This is a simple but essential roadmap for your reader. Briefly outline what each subsequent chapter will cover. It helps manage your reader's expectations and makes your thesis easier to navigate. You can write something straightforward like, this thesis is organized into 5 chapters. Chapter 2 reviews the existing literature on urbanization and biodiversity loss. Chapter 3 explains the methodology used for data collection and analysis. Chapter 4 presents the key findings of the study. Finally, Chapter 5 discusses the implications of these findings, offers conclusions, and suggests directions for future research. This little section acts as a signpost, guiding your reader smoothly from the introduction into the main body of your work. It shows that you have a well-organized and logical plan for presenting your research. So let's quickly recap the key to a great introduction. Start broad with your background, then narrow down to your specific research problem. Clearly state your research objectives and the specific research questions or hypotheses you'll be addressing. Convince your reader of the importance of your study by answering the "so what" question. Be honest about your scope and limitations. And finally, provide a clear roadmap with the structure of the thesis. A few practical tips to keep in mind: be clear and concise. Avoid jargon where possible and save the deep details for later chapters. Your introduction should be engaging and make a compelling case for why your research deserves to be read. Remember, a great introduction doesn't just happen. It takes time and revision. Many academics actually write a draft of their introduction first, then come back and refine it after they've written the rest of their thesis. That way you can ensure it perfectly reflects the final work. I hope this breakdown helps you feel more confident about tackling your introduction chapter. You've got this. Let me sum up. The introduction chapter lays the groundwork for your entire thesis. It is your opportunity to introduce the topic, explain why it is important, and guide the reader into the heart of your research. A strong introduction frames your research problem clearly, sets up your objectives, and makes a case for why your study is valuable. Now, current slide, we're diving deep into one of the most crucial and sometimes most intimidating parts of any research project or dissertation: the literature review. The literature review examines existing research in the field. It identifies gaps in the current knowledge, discusses key theories and frameworks, and establishes how your research will contribute to filling those gaps. If you've ever wondered, what exactly is this chapter for? Or how do I even start writing one? Now you learn in this slide. Literature. In this chapter, summarize key studies and findings that are relevant to your research. Group these studies logically, either chronologically or by theme. It identifies gaps in the current knowledge and positions your study as a valuable contribution. Example: studies by Walker 2018 and Smith 2020 show significant biodiversity loss due to urbanization. However, research specific to Southeast Asia remains limited. Stick around, because by the end of this slide you will have a clear roadmap to writing a literature review that not only impresses your supervisor but also sets a rock-solid foundation for your own research. So let's start with the basics. What is a literature review? Think of it as a scholarly conversation. You're not just summarizing what others have said. You're entering into a dialogue with the experts who have come before you. The literature review surveys the existing research on your topic, the key studies, the foundational theories, and the major debates. Its main goal is to establish the academic context for your research. It is your chance to show that you have done your homework and to demonstrate how your work will build upon, challenge, or contribute something new to the existing body of knowledge. A strong literature review is typically built around a few key sections. The first and most substantial is the review of existing research. Here you'll summarize the most important studies related to your topic. You need to discuss the major findings, the methodologies used, and the dominant theories in your field. For example, if your topic is remote work, you might write something like "Early Studies by Smith and Jones in 2010 consistently showed that remote work can lead to both increased productivity and improved work-life balance for employees." However, later research from Chen in 2018 introduced a more nuanced view, suggesting these benefits are highly dependent on the industry and the level of autonomy granted to the employee. Notice how this isn't just a list. It's a synthesis, showing how the conversation has evolved over time. This brings us to the next critical section: identifying the gaps in the literature. This is where your research finds its purpose. A gap isn't just something that hasn't been studied. It's an unanswered question, a contradiction in findings, or a population that has been overlooked. Finding and clearly articulating this gap is your so what moment. It justifies why your study is necessary. Continuing our remote work example, you could say, while there is considerable research on the general benefits of remote work, very few studies have specifically investigated its impact on the mental well-being of junior software developers, a demographic facing unique pressures related to mentorship and career progression in a virtual environment. See that? You've just carved out a niche for your own work. This is the single most important step in positioning your research. Once you've identified the gap, you need to introduce your theoretical framework. This might sound complicated, but it's essentially the lens through which you'll view your research problem. Theories and models provide a structure for your study and help guide your analysis. They give you the concepts and language to explain the phenomena you're observing. For instance, you could state, to explore the relationship between remote work and mental well-being, this study will adopt the Job Demands Resources or GDR model. This model will allow us to frame factors like social isolation as a job demand and resources like flexible hours and strong team communication as job resources, helping us to understand how they interact to affect employee well-being. Using an established theory adds credibility and depth to your research. It shows you're not just making things up but are grounding your work in established academic principles. Flowing directly from your theoretical framework is your research framework, sometimes called a conceptual framework. This is where you get specific about your own study. It is a visual or narrative representation of how you expect the different variables in your research to interact. It's essentially your hypothesis laid out clearly. For example, based on the GDR model, this study hypothesizes that for junior software developers, high job demands like extended virtual meetings will negatively impact mental well-being. Conversely, it is proposed that high job resources, such as regular one-on-one mentorship, will moderate this negative effect, leading to better overall job satisfaction and retention. This framework acts as the blueprint for your methodology and data analysis. It makes your research testable and your objectives crystal clear. Now that we understand the core components, let's talk about some practical tips for actually writing the literature review. First, structure is everything. Don't just list summaries of papers one after another. Organize your review logically. You could structure it chronologically, showing how understanding of the topic has developed over time. Or you could structure it thematically, grouping studies together based on common themes, theories, or findings. The thematic approach is often more sophisticated as it allows you to compare and contrast different perspectives more directly. For example, you could have a section on the impact of remote work on productivity, another on effects on team collaboration, and a third on psychological well-being. My second and perhaps most important practical tip is this: be critical. A literature review is not a book report. You are not just there to summarize. You need to critically engage with the research. What are the strengths of a particular study? What are its weaknesses or limitations? Was the sample size too small? Was the methodology appropriate? Does the author's conclusion really follow from their data? By analyzing the literature in this way, you're not just reporting what's been said. You're evaluating the state of the field and demonstrating your own expertise. Show your reader that you have a deep and critical understanding of the subject matter. Finally, always link the literature back to your own research. For every study or theory you discuss, you should be thinking, how does this relate to my research problem? And how does this inform my research questions or objectives? Make these links explicit in your writing. Use phrases like "this finding is particularly relevant to the current study because," or "building on the work of Johnson, my research will explore." This constant connection between the existing literature and your own project is what makes your review a cohesive and persuasive piece of academic writing rather than just a collection of summaries. It proves that your research is a logical and necessary next step in the academic conversation. So to recap, your literature review sets the stage. It surveys existing research, identifies a crucial gap, introduces a theoretical framework to guide your study, and presents your specific research framework. When writing, remember to structure it logically, be critical in your analysis, and constantly link the literature back to your own research problem. It's a challenging chapter, no doubt, but it's also your opportunity to showcase your expertise and to prove why your research matters. Take it one step at a time and you'll build a powerful foundation for the rest of your project. I hope this breakdown was helpful. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Now move to next slide. Alright everyone, that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into how to write your Ph.D. thesis step by step. Let's do a quick recap of what we've covered today. We started with the abstract, that powerful bite-sized summary that needs to grab your reader's attention right from the start. We broke down how to make it concise, comprehensive, and utterly compelling. Then we moved on to the introduction. This is where you set the stage, right? We talked about how to clearly state your research problem, establish its significance, and outline the scope of your study. Your introduction is your roadmap, and we've gone over how to draw it so that anyone can follow your journey. Finally, we tackled the mighty literature review. This isn't just a summary of what you've read. It's a critical synthesis that shows where your work fits into the larger academic conversation. We discussed strategies for organizing your sources, identifying gaps in the existing research, and using that to build a rock-solid foundation for your own contribution. I know it's a lot to take in, but you're doing great. These first 3 sections are absolutely crucial, and now you have the tools to build them effectively. Remember, writing a thesis is a marathon, not a sprint. Take these lessons, apply them one step at a time, and be patient with yourself. I'm really excited for our next session, part 2, where we'll continue building on this foundation. We'll be moving on to the methodology, results, and discussion sections. That's where you get to show off your brilliant research and interpret what it all means. Thank you so much for your focus and hard work today. I hope you found this session valuable. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And most importantly, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. We've got so much more to cover. If you have any questions about today's content, drop them in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to every single one of you. Thanks again for watching. Until the next video. Keep up the fantastic work.